43 of Act 1019, which previously authorized the minister, based on the recommendation of the Narcotics Control Commissions, to issue the licenses. Unlike the previous bill, the amended bill will ensure that persons found guilty of drug cases are made to pay a fine instead of serving a prison term. The new bill also makes the Narcotics Control Commission autonomous, meaning, going forward, it doesn't have to depend on other institutions like the Ghana Police Service to prosecute drug-related cases. I am joined on the table by Augustus Akwe, a parliamentary correspondent here at GBC, and Kwame Appiah-Kubi, a journalist from Kesbe Media. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to just start our discussion right away. I want to start with you, Augustus, because you have been through it all in Parliament. We had the initial bill, and then way back in 2020, that was when the first bill was amended and assented to. And then we have this new one, the amended part. Basically, what are the details of this particular bill compared to the old one?
Okay, so with this new amended Narcotics Control Commission bill, we have the rationale for starters, I mean, like you said in the introduction, was to amend it purposely because when the 2020 bill was passed, the Supreme Court had decided, now it had been taken to court that Parliament didn't do debate on it before it was passed, and so we had to amend it. And so the essence of this amendment was to reinstate Section 43 of the bill, which noted that the Minister of Health would be able to give license to people to cultivate. Now, in times past, we know that the possession of narcotics and cannabis, for that matter, is illegal. But there has been the incidents around the world where it is being used for medicinal purposes, and so there is a need for the country also needs that needed revenue. All revenue streams would have to be harnessed by the country to ensure that we optimize our potentials as a country. And so this bill, in a sense, prior to it, we didn't have any law that backed the commercial cultivation of cannabis. And so with this bill, it gives the basis for industries to seek license, and that's the key word. They would have to seek license because day in and day out, people are being arrested for possession of dry leaves or Indian hemp, and that is against the law. But with this, it will be a streamlined activity by the state to ensure that people who grow cannabis follow the due process in exporting them, and it's not for even local people, for exports. So that's the key.
Yeah, I still want to stay on you. You know, as part of its argument to strike out this Section 43, the court also mentioned that it was contradicting the Article 106 of the 1992 Constitution, which states that prior to the passage of a bill like this, there should be a debate in Parliament, and then a report should be presented by the committee to leadership of Parliament. That was part of its argument. Before this particular bill was passed, has it been able to fulfill this argument from the court side? Yes,
because when the Minister for the Interior, Ambrose Derry, presented the bill in Parliament this week, we also have to note that Parliament passed it through under a certificate of urgency, and so they expedited the deliberations on it. Now, being expedited through the process within a week didn't negate the fact that there was due process and there was due diligence on it. And so when Ambrose Derry was presenting the bill to Parliament, the amended bill to Parliament, he noted that in as much as he believes in the constitutionality of the Supreme Court as the apex court and that their ruling is always binding, he and for that matter government wasn't seeking to impute disregard to the Supreme Court, but he felt the Supreme Court didn't listen to Parliament's side before making its judgment, because in the parliamentary process, when a bill is presented, the Speaker would refer it to the appropriate committee for it to do its deliberations on it. There is always a draft bill that is presented. The committee, in doing its work, relies on the Constitution to ensure that whatever bill that has been presented doesn't go or doesn't contain clauses and articles that go contrary to the Constitution itself. Again, it relies on expert opinion on the committee itself, because in the composition of committees, there are members from with relevant background in the work of that committee. Even if they don't have, by virtue of the fact that they being on the committee, they would have to be conversant with issues on that specific matter. And so this one was even a joint committee. So it was referred to the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, the Committee on Health. They were all part in the deliberations of this bill. And if I should quote a portion of the committee's report, I mean, they met key institutions and key actors in coming to the basis for passing or recommending to the House to pass this bill. And so I feel that Parliament did its due diligence. Again, when the committee even presented its report to the House, members on both sides made comments on it. And what Ambrose Dory also said, that in 2020, before the bill was passed, even though in essence there wasn't much debate on it on the floor, I mean, committees are extension of the House. And so when the committee presents the report and it's by consensus or by majority decision, I mean, it seeks to establish the fact that on the committee level, they were unanimous in agreeing to amend in Section 43. So when it was passed without, to the public, without much debate, in actual sense, they had thoroughly done their work. That is why on the floor, there was no objection to it for it to be passed. Yes.
Kwame, you've been following the discussion as well. I just want us, we're going to go into details of what this bill offers to us. But just for the public, I know we have a lot of people who are taking cannabis, or as we know, weed in secret. This particular bill, is it just any weed, or is it any kind of weed? Is it what we take out there? Is that what we are being allowed to cultivate now?
Okay, so let me say good morning to those that are watching us from their homes, and then your very self, and then my colleague who has equally explained how the bill was taken through the processes in Parliament. And then, first of all, we must clarify, just as you are asking, that the amendment to Act 1019 is not for the purposes of which many Ghanaians are thinking of. The passage of the bill or the amendment of the Section 43 of the Narcotics Control Commission Act is purposely to allow industries and then cosmetic producing companies to have access to cannabis. And even with that, there are specific specifications in which the Act requires. So you want to do a little bit of, let's say, 0.3% in that form, THC. That is the quality in which they are looking for, of which the bill, per the report of the Joint Committee, explains the fact that a lot of countries around the world are using same cannabis. And so there is a whole world trade when it comes to cannabis. Countries are exporting cannabis to better off their economies. And so we having a fertile soil, I mean, the government at large, precisely the Ministry for the Interior, feels that it is the time for Ghana to do same, because we can actually harness the potentials when it comes to that aspect of our economy. So it is not, quote unquote, Yemen V, or Ghanaians are legalizing the smoking of weed generally. So Ghanaians must understand the punishment in which the previous act prescribed still holds. I mean, even with the current modification of the act, if you do it and you don't do it the right way in which the law requires, you'll find yourself wanting. The act then again explains the fact that for individuals or investors or companies to go into the cultivation of cannabis, you ought to secure the license through the minister in charge of Interior. And so these are the basic things that ought to be clear in the new amendment law. Now, what we can do again as a country is to educate the people. We can't just throw in the bill or the new law, so to speak, for people to have the mentality or the mindset that, oh, we have made mention of them on radio, on our various media house platforms and all of that. And so anybody can go about cultivating cannabis. Before you do that, there is a due process that you need to go through by first of all applying for the license. Now you come back to the whole brouhaha surrounding the amendments and then the ruling of the Supreme Court. I think the case was there since 2022. Ezwami versus the Attorney General. I mean, the Attorney General went in there, the plaintiff made his case prior to the passage or the amendment of the act. He was very clear in that he said that the law ought to be debated. Secondly, any bill that is introduced in Parliament must be accompanied by a memorandum explaining the basics for that particular proposed bill. And so he, as a plaintiff, saw it in such a way that Parliament was just rushing through the processes, and he feels that the needed or required memorandum was not accompanied, even though the provisions were there. And then the Attorney General, on behalf of government, on behalf of the ministry, had a stand to argue out the case. And this is where I may disagree with people who are, so to speak, bashing the Supreme Court on the decision they took on July 2022. You go there, you argue your case out. I'm the plaintiff. I come in with my issues to be addressed. There is a pre-case conference where we all agree on the conflicting issues to be addressed by the court. And so the Attorney General, based on the evidence available to him from the work Parliament had done prior to the amendment, ought to have come out straight with some of the things that Parliament did before the passage. I think, in my view, the Supreme Court was wise enough to consider both evidence from both sides, both the plaintiff and then the defendant, in this case the Attorney General. If you read the full details of the case, the Supreme Court has set the fact that the AG's department was unable to defend the issues raised by the plaintiff. And so if the Supreme Court is giving out a judgment and then telling you that such a bill did not go through the right procedures of debate, okay, then it's problematic. If Parliament was of the view that debate ought not to be differentials in a position or in a sense where we need to disagree, maybe there ought to be an opposing view as to the passage or amendment of the bill. But this time round, there was consensus building. All sides of the House believed that it was time for us to actually harness the potentials of this aspect of our economy. They ought to have explained to the court through the Attorney General the processes in which the bill was taken through. Your inability to do that in courts, the court will always consider the available evidence in passing out their judgment. So the assertion that the Supreme Court did not consult the Parliament and then did not get to realize the work they ought to have done before passing such a judgment or striking down Section 43 of Act 1019, I think it's neither here nor there, because the government machinery was fully represented by the Office of the Attorney General. So that aside, now you come to the main basis for the agency of this particular amendment law. Now the Interior Minister comes again to tell you that if Ghana had projected that all things being equal, we were going to get about $3 billion out of the production or the cultivation of this cannabis we're talking about. Now, worldwide, as we speak, in America alone, by 2025, they are projecting that the cannabis industry in America alone is going to give them some $30 billion. Peru, Mexico, and so many other countries are cultivating it for same industrial purposes, and they are making the best out of it. For Mexico like this, in 2022 alone, as at the month of June, is able to make some $1 billion. So this whole thing that we want to do as a country has a background. We have case study or examples of countries who are already into it that we can actually learn from the processes in which they do same. And so I do not agree precisely with the sort of brouhaha and the sort of confusion that seems to be erupting between the judiciary and then the legislature. It seems to me that, so to speak, the judiciary, in a way, in the minds of the members of parliament and the speaker himself, are undermining the authority of parliament. But it ought not to be so. I mean, we need to come to a point of convergence where the state arms of government work together for the good of our economy. Now, we projected as a country that even prior to the passage of this amendment law, we seek to make some $3 billion from it annually. The minister tells us so, because even prior to the strike down of Section 43, as we knew in 2022, the minister again espouses the fact that there were some foreign direct investors who are on standby and then ready to get the license and then partner with local folks to be able to do the cultivation. I mean, I believe strongly that if all these things were explained at the courts, as at the time the plaintiff, Ezwami, filed his case at the Supreme Court, we wouldn't have gotten to this point. Okay? So I feel more of the inability of the AG's department to do justice to the issues at the court of law. But one thing the judiciary must also understand is that my brother explained the fact that at any point in time, both houses can agree. And then once a proposal is made, it goes to the committee level. I've read the current report of the joint committee. So there was a joint committee on health, there was a joint committee on defense and interior, and then I think the Ministry of Finance or something. Yeah. There was one other committee. The Ministry of Health was actually also part of it. I mean, all these experts came together at the committee level to discuss the proposals. Okay? The health sector will tell you the effect, the negative sides, that if we are unable to regulate the sector so well, the impact it may bring to us. So once that is done, and then consensus is built at the committee level, it now comes to plenary for the debate. At that point, if the committee presents its report, and everyone feels that the report is so convincing based on the work done, I see no reason why, we need to have divergent opinions. Okay? Once the minority side and the majority side believes in this aspect, that, okay, we need to harness the potentials of other sectors of the economy, so be it. So they come to a conclusion and then they pass the law. I feel the Supreme Court felt in their own wisdom that once there were no divergent views, it means that the bill did not go through the proper debate. And so all these things can be done. Just yesterday, I'm told, or I heard, that the Supreme Court is citing the Speaker for contempt of court and all of that. I mean, in the coming days, it's going to be interesting how things are going to unfold. But I think, all in all, it is best for us as a country. $3 billion, if you are able to realize it, we wouldn't be seeking IMF support. It is the same amount of money the IMF is giving us today. And even with that, it comes in trenches. It doesn't come as a whole. And so as a country, what are we doing to ourselves? The only good thing is that we need to ensure that regulation is duly carried out. And then again, once the proceeds begin to come in, we will use it for the right purposes for which this whole law has come into existence. So, in my view, I think it is a good way to go. We just need to make sure that the law applies. We don't do favoritism as to who can get the license to cultivate and who cannot secure the license to cultivate. When we begin to do same on political lines, it defeats the entire purpose of the passage of the law.
Kwame, I understand what you mean. I mean, between the courts and parliament, they are all like there, so
on equal pedestrian.
Yes, most definitely. And whether parliament agrees with the decision of the court or not, at the end of the day, it came back and it went through the right processes to pass this bill again. So, as to whether they agreed on the decision of the court or not, I'm sure in their closet they agreed that okay, we could have done it better, and now they've come back and they've corrected the mistake that they were told they made. But you just mentioned the potentials of this particular industry. My question now is, now if an industry or a company comes and is able to secure the license, we know he will have to go to the minister for the license. After you have begun the cultivation, which institution or who ensures regulation? Because at the end of the day, even though we are talking about medicinal and industrial purposes, there are a lot of other people out there who might want to engage in other activities aside those two purposes. Which institution is supposed to regulate the activities of these people?
Okay, so first of all, if you listen to the name of the law, it is Narcotics Control Commission Act. So the Amendment Act, which is Act 1019, it tells you precisely that the Narcotics Control Commission is basically in charge of its regulation. Only that if you want to secure the license for cultivation, you ought to go through the process, and then the Minister for Interior ought to be the final signatory before the licenses are issued. Thereafter, it is expected that as an independent body, the Narcotics Control Commission will be able to regulate the sector properly by applying the provisions of the law. In the absence of that, I don't see how best the minister himself will wake up every morning from his office, going to fields to monitor and then observe how people are going by the protocols and then the dictates of the law. And so I believe that once the same law seeks to independently grant powers to the Narcotics Control Commission, whichever thing this same law requires of them to do, to be able to do the observation, ensure that people do not violate same provisions of the law, will be carried out. Only that if they are also not giving the required support as an institution, then monitoring and regulation will equally be difficult for them. So we don't make them autonomous, and then on the other hand, we make them handicapped, or we deprive them of the needed support that they need to be able to carry out their work. So I think in time past, they've done a very good job. When it comes to drug trading and its trafficking, we know on countless occasions they've been able to, come to terms with some of the things that people try to smuggle out of the country. In all of this, people will try to beat the system and then have their way. But the vigilance of such institutions will also help us to really actualize the main aims and the purposes for which we are doing this as a country.
If you are just joining us, this is the Reporters Roundtable. We are discussing the passage of the Narcotics Commission's Amendment Bill 2023. Join the discussion on GBC News, GTV, and on Facebook at Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Augustus, I want to come back quickly to you. Now the bill has been passed. When does it become a full-fledged law? When will it start being used?
Okay, so now that it has been passed, like all other bills, the president will have to give his assent to it. Now, since it came under a certificate of urgency, and government itself says that it is losing, because even in 2020, when the original one was passed, there are talks that there were foreign investors who were partnering local to commence the cultivation. And so already investments by some companies have come in, but since the licensing regime was struck out by virtue of the Apex Court's decision, they couldn't proceed any further. And so already some investments are locked up by some companies. And so I'm very sure that in the next few days, the president will give his assent to it for the Narcotics Control Commission to be able to start issuing the licenses to these investors, because government feels it's losing out. It is losing out big time. And so, like my brother rightly said, there is the need for urgency to this. Yeah. So I'm sure the president in the next few days would assent to it, and then it becomes operational.
I had a rumor you've been in Parliament with the MPs. Is it true that we're already planning how we can exchange our cannabis for something else?
Something else like
like money.
I mean, in this instance, it becomes whispers among corridors. But I feel the bill, the passage of the amendment, Section 43, is just the first hurdle. The main task will be how effective regulation would be, because the bill again seeks to bar the use of or production of cannabis for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
Now, there is going to be a thin line between commercial purpose and recreational production of it. And so, like you said, the people will always try to beat the system. And so there is a need to plug all those loopholes even before, because I have been told that already some pharmaceutical companies are giving some bit of license to even import cocaine.
Cannabis.
Cocaine to use. It becomes a component of painkillers and some other drugs. And so there are control measures. And so already the Narcotics Control Commission has that experience in ensuring it. What I'm trying to see is even the production, whether it will be segmented within the regions, or there will be a designated zone where all companies would have to operate, because in all regions there are the production of it, especially in the Volta region, even in the northern region. And so I am now looking at how the Narcotics Control Commission itself will reach out to the public, because at this point in time, education becomes critical. Because now the bill has been passed, it becomes law after the president assent. What next? Can anybody come and secure licensing? What's the threshold for capital for a company, to be able to acquire the license? And then again, how do local companies or local individuals come into play here? Because already we are told that foreign investors are coming in. How are they coming in? Are they coming in with the capital for local farmers to just grow, for them to export and go and do the negotiations outside the country? The Minister for the Interior noted that, and the committee itself in its report noted that the government is for now looking at the African region as its immediate market, but the end game is to get to the United States of America and Canada, where it brings in a lot of income because of the large pharmaceutical conglomerates that are there, and the large consumption of industrial cannabis. And so that is my challenge now, how investment is going to play out too.
Kwame, we are talking about regulation, and you've already mentioned that the Narcotics Control Commission have the responsibility to ensure that it is regulated. Are they resourced enough to be able to take on this tax, especially now that they are made autonomous, so they just don't have to regulate. They need to look at court cases and all that. Do they have enough resources in terms of personnel, in terms of whatever, to ensure that they undertake this regulatory exercise properly?
Okay, so first off, the good thing is that this whole amendment aspect of the bill and then the law itself is not a private sponsored law, and so it came from the executive themselves. The thing that we know is the fact that they might have done their cost-benefit analysis and then decided to make such proposals. You look at the cost you are going to incur when it comes to ensuring full regulation, and then you look at the benefits that you are going to derive upon proper regulation and then implementation of the said law. Now, again, the Minister for Interior, I am very sure, is in the known of the status of the Narcotics Control Commission and what is required of them to do a better job. As well, we can also talk about the modalities, just as you mentioned. How is the cultivation going to be done? Which regions out of the 16 regions we have the good soil or the good potentials to do same cultivation? If we are to consider all these modalities, then we will be able to understand how the operationalization of this whole law is going to be like. For instance, if we decide that, okay, when it comes to the cultivation of cannabis, let's focus on probably, so to speak, the western region, maybe the western north region, the northern regions, or for a start, we can say that, okay, let's deal with, let's say, 3 major regions. For the start, let's see how regulations are upheld, and then let's see how we operationalize the law. We cannot just start at a go. Even though I'm also in the known that already we have some people cultivating same, it's not enough. The question I ask myself again is that under this licensing regime, what is going to happen to those that are already cultivating same prior to the passage of this particular law? Are we going to backdate the law to issue licenses to such people, or, so to speak, we are now starting afresh? Because we know that as a country, our laws do not take a retrospective effect. So we look at the progressiveness of the law. Now, we cannot just start without having a pilot-based project. Yes, so the companies will come in, investors will come in. We need not to be so excited about how much foreign direct investors are going to pump into our economy based on this passage. But we need to be very careful, do due diligence to ensure that this same benefit that we speak of does not end up destroying our economies. And so if the Narcotics Control Commission, I don't know much about their capacity and how they will be able to do the monitoring and then operationalize the whole law. But I so speak that if they do not have the capacity, it is the responsibility of the minister to ensure that the required capacity is given them. And then the president, I'm sure, upon assent to this same law, will be interested. The Minister for Finance will have to at least give them the budgetary allocation that will support them in terms of their operation. Other than that, I do not see how we will be able to achieve the full potentials of what we've written. The minister said that we are looking forward to get $3 billion. Already he told us that we've lost it because of the strikeout of Section 43. But I think it's not too late yet. If they have their due plans in process, I mean, everything can commence. It is not just about the talk. We know that that is what we are actually good at. On paper, everything will seem fine with us. But when it comes to the real work on the field, that is where you see that people are cutting corners. They go taking their percentage. Again, I question the modality of the issuance of the licenses. Is it going to be on political basis? Are we going to be doing, people-centered kind of realizing that potential? And so a lot will come into play. But in the absence of its commencement, we cannot say much We can only project and then assume some of the things that may happen moving forward. But we want to see how things will turn out in the coming days.
And also, as you heard Kwame, we already have some people who are involved in the cultivation. I want to believe they are local farmers, and then if they are, what does this law talk about? Because it looks like our focus are on
foreign direct investment.
Exactly. How does the bill take care of our local farmers if they want to go into the cultivation? Does it mention anything for them?
So, in essence, the bill just talks. It's actually, the amendment is just a one clause amendment. Okay. So it just talks, but it talks of the pH value of the dried leaf. Yeah. And so it's not all weed or all cannabis that are meant for commercial purposes. Okay. Or meant for commercial use. And so there's a pH content of it. Yes. So that is where the Narcotics Control Commission would then have to come in. That if they see local cultivation of it, they definitely would have to take it for testing. And again, it comes down to the education I was talking about, that there are local farmers. They definitely would, because this is going to be an industrial, for industrial purposes, there should be there will be a threshold of acres of farmlands or the investment that you have put in as a farmer. And I feel a lot of the local farmers will be disadvantaged in that regard because many just grow on a few acres or just at their backyard for a few listed. And so I feel, and again, since there is already the production of it, it's good government is now harnessing this or advancing this bill, because then if the local farmer knows that if I plant it to this level, I will be able to submit it for export, then they might stop growing the one that makes people, like someone will say, behave in inappropriate ways. I'll stop growing the high ones and then the high grade ones, and then go into these because there will be money in it. Yes, so it is for the Narcotics Control Commission to come out with those modalities that the number of acres or the quantum of the number of tons you can present before you be given the license to export it. It all
I know, Kwame, I know we are, as we try to decongest our prisons, this bill has mentioned that if you are caught in a case like that, initially we're supposed to serve a prison term, now you will be made to pay a fine. Do you think it's good, especially as we're also trying to fight drug abuse in the country?
Okay, so first of all, what we must know is that there are international treaties that Ghana is part of, we've signed under the United Nations. And so one thing that we need to know is the fact that cannabis cultivation for industrial purposes, I mean, the United Nations conventions and treaties allows its own trade. But for recreational purposes, it is up to the government of Ghana to make its own laws to regulate it. Now, if you say that people flout the law, and then as a government or as a country, because we need money, we ought to take fines and then let them go, okay? There are consequences that if we are not careful, we will not be able to handle as a country. And what do I say? I mean, you go into our health sector, things that has to do with people, so to speak, who have lost their minds or their sanity out of the smoking of some of these drugs are not properly taken care of. We do not have much recreational centers that seems to correct people who are deeply, I mean, addicts when it comes to such products. And so the only form of, let's say, detention is the fear of going to prison. You take that one out, people feel that, okay, how much am I supposed to pay if I flout the law? If this is how much I am to pay, then I'll rather use it abusively. You go to courts, they fine you. I mean, that is where you see family members gathering around you because they do not want you to, fail. Yes, they will gather around you even though they know it's a bad habit, but they can't sit back and watch on for you to, be thrown into prison without you being able to pay the fine. So first of all, I think it is good aspect of our law, but we must as well consider it again and see how best we can control it. If the fine comes alongside trying to correct the person, and then again I talk about the recreational facilities, we don't have them. Okay, you go to Pantine and all those areas, people who are deeply drug addicts, who have lost their sanity, you see the way we control them, even the healthcare professionals who are taking care of these people, the conditions under which they work is so abysmal. And as a country, we cannot just throw our potentials into the dust like that. Most of these people who are abusing same drugs are the youths, and they are the working force of the same economy that we seek to better. And so anything that we can do to protect the future potentials of our country must be done. Government's focus should not just be on the fact that this economy can make us some $3 billion. At least as a country, we've recorded far more resources than what we seek to get from this mass production, or let's say legalization under the industrial purpose. Where once you're talking about oil, thinking that once we get oil, all our problems will be solved. If we manage everything as a country, now we do not see the good thing that oil brought to us. Any Ghanaian cannot put their hand at the chest and tell you the benefit we've derived from oil. They steal our monies in a manner in which they are not supposed to. Okay, so I do not want to say that predicting doom, this whole thing may seem to be a fiasco. Politicians will end up being behind people, granting licenses to their friends to cultivate and make monies to themselves. We do not want to see that. At least as a country, we need to chart a new path to ensure that we're positioning the youth in the position where it will help the future and then help the future of this country. So everything we are doing must not just be money. Okay? Because if I listen to the minister on the floor of parliament, the only sense I get is that we need money in our economy. $3 billion is what we are losing. Should we have allowed the law to go through, and then without this whole brouhaha from the Supreme Court, at least Ghana, as at this point, we would have made some level of money which will come in to contribute to our economy. But what about all those resources we had in the past and the ones that we still benefit from? What comes in? At the end of the fiscal year, as a country, we do our projections in terms of revenue, and then our expenditures are far outweighing our revenues. We are always on the deficit because the same politicians who are giving us same promises end up doing certain things they ought not to do. And that is what has brought us this far. So all the good things we are saying, all the good things they've put in the report, trying to convince every Ghanaian to see the light at the end of the tunnel, should not just be a fanciful thing. We should just make sure that as a country, for once, we are serious with one thing that we want to do to better ourselves and better the lives of our youth. In the absence of that, it defeats the purpose for which we are doing this.
Augustus, you heard Kwame. We are talking about $3 billion that we are losing because this particular.
That's what the minister says.
I
don't even know his calculations though. But
that's what the minister says. But if you look at some states in the U.S., like Colorado, they are using about more than $131 million, and they are using it to help the homeless and other development infrastructure. If you look at Massachusetts, a report says that the cannabis industry is creating more jobs than even all other industries that they know of. Do you think that, we heard Kwame, we're here when we're talking about oil. Oil is coming to Ghana. Now all our programs will come to an end. But we are here now. Now we can't even tell whether we still have the oil or not. Do you think that there's light at the end of this particular tunnel?
No. This to me, this will be a drop in the ocean.
Wow.
This might end up being a drop in the ocean because, again, the target markets haven't been fully actualized.
Exactly.
Again, Ghana is going into this industry as a newbie. There are established markets. Rwanda is already ahead of us. Zambia has also started. So even within the African region, there are considerable countries who have already made inroads. And so Ghana, I feel, he is the minister and government has the indicators and all that. And so that's why they make these projections. But I feel we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. We shouldn't get ahead of ourselves because even with, we talked about our e-levy issue. Government made projections, but mid-year it realized that the projections weren't working. And so I feel it's good for me. It's good looking at the number of times over the years that people have been caught smuggling Indian hemp out of the country. It means the market is there, even out of this country. And so I feel that it's about regulation, it's about monitoring, and it's about we being strategic enough. Again, we should also know that, like Kwame rightly said, even in our mental facilities, we don't have enough psychiatric facilities in the country. How is this new regime of licensing companies going to reflect on our mental health cases? Are we going to look at it in such a way that we'll have a PPP arrangement with these new companies that are coming to obtain the license to ensure that they invest in psychiatric care?
Have the rehabilitation centers.
We have rehabilitation centers, but I don't have a lot of them. I know there's chosen rehab in Accra and all that, but we don't have a lot of them. And for a lot of them today are NGOs. The state doesn't have enough, or state rehab facilities are virtually non-existent. Apart from Accra Psychiatric Hospital, Ankafo, Pantai. I don't know. Again, this is coming at a time where the country is also battling with brain drain in the health professional sector. A lot of psychiatric nurses are leaving our hospitals, Pantai, Ankafo. A lot of them are going, and they are going to the states to pursue nursing essential examination and begin practicing. Some even have employment agencies outside and employment recruitment agencies outside who are targeting them specifically and facilitating their movement. How is this bill going to reflect on this? Because like Kwame rightly said, the youth are the bulk consumers of narcotics in the country, especially Indian hemp. Now, when you go onto social media apps and chat sites, you have people freely advertising even meth and weed. Weed has become common. How is this new licensing regime going to reflect on this? Because I feel that the lapses we did with gold, leaving Obuasi and Takwa in the state they are, despite the decades of mining gold, the lapses we've made with oil, we shouldn't bring those lapses to this regime. Companies that are coming in might be able to sign MOUs or might be obligated by contract to ensure that a significant percentage of the revenue that they make from these exports go back into ensuring or mitigating the social side effects, health, psychological side effects of the use of cannabis. That will bring more meaning to this passage. Other than that, it remains a drop in the ocean in terms of revenue, and it won't bring out the impactful need that we see in it now.
Kwame, do you think that, because I know when we talk about oil and all these natural resources that we discovered in our country, we allowed the foreigners to come in, and most of them, when they come in, they have their conditions, and because we are just looking out for the money, we are ready to agree to anything. Do you think that with this particular industry, shouldn't we have begun it ourselves so that we are able to lay down our own rules, so that later anyone who comes in will be forced to abide by those rules? Do you think we should have done that?
I'm very happy about these questions, because I'm quite surprised that even with the amendments, we did not make provisions for local content. So you want to do cultivation on that mass basis. I think the focus of the minister is on the foreign direct investors or investments that seeks to come in. He does not tell the entire country how local partners are going to fully realize the benefits of the same law or the same thing we want to do as a country. Is it that he sees local partners not having the full potential to do that level of mass production or cultivation? If that is how the analysis goes, then there is also a burden on the government to make provisions for local content. The local farmers are people that once they see that their cultivation and the yields will grant them some level of money or some level of improvement in their living conditions, will go all out in doing same. And so I do not see how we want to allow the local Ghanaian person to actually be part of this. First of all, what does it take to even secure the license? Is there any level of payment, of amount of money involved? Is it going to be that affordable? Since our focus or our attention is being channeled towards these foreign investors, we know that they come in with the dollars and all of that. We agree. But how much will it cost me, a full Ghanaian person who has the interest to go into such cultivation? Am I going to pay $50,000, $100,000, $10,000, or how much am I to pay? It all depends on the modalities in which we want to work with. Now, it must be so affordable to an extent that the average Ghanaian person who is of age and wants to go into that sector will have the opportunity to go into it. We do not have to set any form of barriers that will, at the end of the day, allow these foreigners come in and take over that sector again, just as we've done. Oil sector is fully owned. Okay, those doing the exploration and all of that are foreign companies. You come to the mining sector, it is same. The average Ghanaian person is down there struggling with galamsey. Okay, and we blame them for all the havoc we see around our environment. But we know that these same multinational companies equally do a lot of damage to our environment. We do not talk about them. Less do we talk about the impact their activities are equally having on our environment. And so we need to do things in such a way that the power to do certain things and the power to grow our own people, okay, are fully realized. At the end of the day, if we are unable to do that, if the average Ghanaian cannot pay to secure the license to do same cultivation, then what becomes of it? The person comes in with the money, gets the whole land on a cheaper basis, grow and cultivate it, and then does the export, and the exchange for which we thought of, and then even realized to bring out this whole law, will not be realized.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. If we want to get the required benefit from the cannabis industry, we shouldn't repeat the mistakes we made in the past. I've been discussing with Augustus Akwe, a parliamentary correspondent here at GBC, and Kwame Appiah-Kubi from Kesben Media. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining in the discussion. We have a date, same time next week. Join us again. Be blessed.